Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something kind of hidden, but incredibly important. It's all about the words we use, and maybe more importantly, the ones we're starting to lose, and how that's literally reshaping our minds, our culture, and even our spirit.
Okay, so think about this feeling. A wistful or tender affection for the past. I mean, you could say all of that, or you could just say nostalgia. See, that's the magic of having a rich vocabulary. It's not just about being more efficient. It's about giving a name, a real shape to these super complex feelings we all have. And it's the exact same thing with a word like dilemma, right? This isn't just any old problem. It's that specific, tangled feeling of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. That kind of precision, it's like a superpower of language. But, and this is the big question we're tackling today, what happens when we start losing these words? What happens when our language, and by extension our thinking, just gets flattened down to good or bad or sad? Well, the sources we're digging into here argue that this isn't just about having fewer words in your back pocket. Nope. It's about the very architecture of our thoughts. When our language shrinks, it's like our minds get put in chains. And that brings us to the first and maybe most profound impact, what this does to us psychologically. Okay, so it all kicks off with this really fascinating theory called the Sapir-Whorf Hypothesis. And the core idea is pretty mind-bending. It says that language isn't just a tool we use to talk about thoughts we already have. It actually shapes and creates the thoughts we're even capable of having in the first place. You know, the words we have are literally the building blocks of our reality.
So here's where it gets really crucial. When our vocabulary shrinks, our inner world just becomes less detailed. Think about it. If you don't have a word for ambivalence, can you truly recognize that feeling of being pulled in two opposite directions at once? Or if all you can say is, "I'm sad," do you lose the ability to feel the unique, almost beautiful texture of melancholy? The argument here is, yeah, you do. You can't think deeply about something you can't even name.
You know, George Orwell took this whole idea to its darkest, most chilling conclusion in his book 1984. The creation of this language called newspeak wasn't just about censoring people. It was a tool for thought control. The logic was absolutely terrifying. If you get rid of the word freedom, eventually people will lose the ability to even conceive of the concept of freedom. It's a really stark reminder that when you control language, you're on the path to controlling thought itself. And this brings us to this really cool psychological process called affect labeling. It's basically the journey from having a vague feeling like, I feel bad, to really analyzing it and naming it. This is disappointment. And this is more than just playing with words. Brain scans actually show that when you accurately label an emotion, it literally calms down your brain's stress response. So precision gives you power over your own feelings. But what happens in our modern world of super simplified communication? You know, when a thumbs up emoji or just typing LOL takes the place of actually describing how we feel? We lose that power, that ability to label and really process our emotions. And the result, as the sociologist Sherry Turkle puts it, is this strange state of being alone together. We're all constantly connected online, but we feel more and more emotionally disconnected because our interactions are just so shallow.
And look, this loss of our rich inner world, it doesn't just stay cooped up inside our own heads. Oh no, it spills out and starts to shape our entire reality. It's like the philosopher Wittgenstein famously said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." And when those limits start shrinking for everybody, well, that has massive, massive consequences for our shared culture.
So, let's zoom out. We've been talking about the individual mind, but now let's look at the collective, our culture. The argument in the source material is that a culture with a poor vocabulary becomes really vulnerable to something called commodification. That's a fancy word for when deep, complex ideas get simplified, packaged up, and sold back to us.
And a perfect example of this is mindfulness. Originally, this was not some quick fix. It was a deeply profound spiritual practice rooted in Buddhist philosophy. It was a whole path toward enlightenment that required years of deep reflection to cultivate real awareness and compassion.
But fast forward to today. What is mindfulness now? It's been totally commodified. It's a 5-minute stress relief app. It's a corporate wellness perk to make you a better worker. It's a consumable experience. That profound, life-changing core has been completely stripped away, leaving a slick, marketable product that's easy to sell but lacks all of its original depth. And hey, this isn't just happening to mindfulness. This pattern, this oversimplification for easy consumption, it's happening everywhere you look. Really complex social movements like feminism get flattened into a marketable hashtag like #girlboss. Ancient, powerful philosophies like Stoicism are sold as simple life hacks for productivity. And entire political platforms, they get boiled down to these simple, emotionally charged slogans that fit on a bumper sticker. All right, for our final zoom out, we're going to tackle what the source suggests is the most profound consequence of all. It's how this simplification of language actually disconnects us from a sense of meaning, from transcendence, from our highest aspirations as human beings.
You know, for thousands of years, rich, complex language was the only tool humanity had for wrestling with the biggest questions. Think about sacred texts like the Bible or the Upanishads. They used intricate poetry, deep metaphors, and layers of symbolism to explore existence, morality, and the divine. These texts demanded that you engage with them deeply. But our modern media landscape? Wow, it's been a seismic shift. There was a time when mass media actually saw itself as a bridge to wonder. I mean, think about Carl Sagan's Cosmos. But now, the driving force is almost always just pure engagement. Get the click, get the view. So content that was designed to enlighten has been almost completely replaced by content designed for clicks, which leads to all the sensationalism and polarization we see every day.
You know, the media theorist Neil Postman saw this coming decades ago. He warned in his amazing book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, that when a culture becomes obsessed with entertainment, it loses its ability to engage with the deep, difficult questions that give life meaning. Serious reflection requires a totally different kind of language and a totally different kind of attention span than what we're used to now.
And so what happens? We start to lose the very words for our higher aspirations. A profoundly deep spiritual concept like moksha, that's a Sanskrit word that means total liberation from the cycle of suffering and rebirth. That idea is basically incomprehensible in a world that reduces spirituality to a shallow catchphrase like good vibes only. When we lose the words, we lose the ability to even imagine the goal.
Okay, so if it's true, if the limits of our language are really limiting our world, what on earth do we do about it? How do we push back against this huge tide of simplification and start to expand our own horizons again?
Well, the good news is this isn't something that just happens to us. The sources we've looked at suggest we can actively choose to reclaim this richness. We can intentionally pick up challenging books, philosophy, literature that expand not just our vocabulary, but our minds. We can choose to have deep, meaningful conversations instead of just shallow exchanges. We can support media that actually tries to enlighten us, not just entertain us. And crucially, we can fight for an education system for the next generation that values language as the absolute foundation of critical thinking.
And all of this brings us right back to that powerful insight from Wittgenstein. But now it feels way more urgent, right? If the limits of our language really are the limits of our world, then that's not just some passive observation. That is a call to action. The world we live in isn't fixed. It's being built, moment by moment, by the words we all choose to use.
Which leaves us with one final, and I think profound question for you. The vocabulary you decide to build, the complex ideas you choose to wrestle with, the depth of the conversations you're willing to have, these aren't just intellectual exercises. They are the actual tools you will use to build your world. So the only real question left is, how large are you going to build it?